Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Please give us a thumbs up in the chat. Let us know if you guys can hear and see us okay. We want you guys to make sure you're able to hear and see us for class 2 of the Podcasting Academy. We're happy to see
Absolutely.
everybody this morning. Hope everybody got a good, nice rest, was able to soak in all the information from yesterday, and is all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for today's class.
We are officially in class two
2.
of the Podcasting Academy. Tiara, Courtney, we are so excited you guys are here. Hopefully, our other students are able to log on very, very shortly. But listen, I'm very excited. I hope that last night was a great, introduction to the first class. We called it the orientation because, usually when it comes to, classes and different things of that nature that you're not familiar with or you're kind of going into blindly, sometimes you want to be able to introduce yourself. You want to be able to meet and greet different people. So that's exactly what we did yesterday. But also, because we are expecting for our students in this course to be able to introduce themselves properly to their listeners, we did also call it the orientation because we probably want for you all to be able to, present yourself in a great way. Because, of course, first impressions are everything.
Yes, they
And we
are.
want to make sure that you make a great, long lasting first impression on your listeners when, of course, you officially hit the podcasting space airwaves. All right. So, of course, like we said before, my name is Meesa.
And my name is Meah.
We also go by Eminem, and we're from the #1 teen and young adult radio show in the nation for inspiration, and it's called M&M Live Radio. Let's go ahead and get started into
Yes, let's go ahead
class
and get
two.
started right into it. So let's go ahead and dive right in.
All right. So, of course, we have a recap of course one, the orientation. We talked about the 3 C's. And just to kind of give you a little refresher, the 3 C's include content creation, confidence building, and creative elements. Okay. Now, #1, the content creation, we talked about time management, how important it is to make sure you carve out time to do your podcast. Just like everything else, you carve out time to eat, you carve out time to go to work, you carve out time to hang out with your friends and whatnot. Even with this project, because that's exactly what it is, a podcast is a continuous project. You have to make sure that you make time and you create a space for your platform and for you to execute your podcast, right? Not only that, but with time management, you want to create somewhat of a schedule. You want to be able to create a schedule in which you understand how often you record. When will your shows come out? When will you post about your shows? When will you have a special guest on your show? Different things of that nature. Or if you're going to record a certain amount of episodes before you officially launch, you got to make sure that you have time management and that takes priority. Okay. Next, in the content creation, we talked about your target audience. You have to know who you are talking to. Yes, yes. You may have a few stragglers. You may have, your grandma listening. You may have, a young person listening, and that may not be in your demographic. But if you could imagine someone on the other end of your podcast, when you send it out and you distribute it and they have their headphones in and they click on your show, what do they look like? How old are they? What region are you trying to target them in? These are what define your target audience. Figure out who those people are that you actually want to direct your podcast to and for. Okay. And lastly is your why. Why are you doing this podcast? What is your passion behind doing this podcast? What is it about your podcast that connects your heart to the hearts of your listeners out there? Okay. Second, we talked about confidence building. We talked about having confidence in yourself. A lot of times we doubt ourselves with something that's we're starting brand new, where we tend to, second guess ourselves.
That's
Even
true.
right now in the studio, Mia and I, we are the pros of overthinking and doubting ourselves. Sometimes we've gotten a whole lot better, but we have a sign in the studio that literally says, don't be so hard on yourself, because it's so easy to do so, especially when you feel like you're a beginner in this field. You have to be able to have confidence in yourself. All right. Also, it's important to have confidence in your podcast. Okay. Know your podcast like the back of your hand. It's very important that you know if anyone were to come to you and ask you, what is your podcast about, without a single second thought, you're able to tell them exactly what your podcast is about. And also have confidence in your personality. You're not supposed to sound like Ryan Seacrest. You're not supposed to sound like Maria Moore on, Magic 107.5, 97.5 here in Atlanta. You're not supposed to, sound like anyone else other than yourself. If you are weird, be weird on the air. Why? Because there are other people who are weird on this planet that want to be able to identify with a podcaster like yourself, right? All right, so here's the last one right here where we're recapping the course one of the orientation in the three C's. We have creative elements. All right, and some examples of those are current news and trending topics, audience interaction. How are you going to get your audience engaged and really invested into your podcasting culture? And the last one is special guest interviews. Make sure every single guest that you do have on the show contributes to your show. Very, very important. These are just a few examples of how you can put your own special thumbprint, your special sauce, your special something on your podcast, with number three being the creative elements.
Yes, yes. Let's go to the next slide. Let's go ahead and dive right into course two for today. We're talking about the basics, where you're going to learn the basic principles of maintaining your podcast through creative elements, branding, marketing, and networking. So this is your time to go ahead and get your pens, your pad, whether it's your notebook in front of you or your notes on your phone. We want you guys to be able to take a lot of notes during this course right here, learning all about the basics. We're going to dive a little bit more deeper into what creative elements we're talking about when we say those, that term, and then even also the differences between branding and marketing and how you can use them towards your podcast. And finally, networking, how you can network in the industry you're in, your niche for your podcast, and then how it can benefit you.
Absolutely. Let's go into it. All right, so we're taking a little deeper dive into creative elements. This is one of my favorite parts of the three C's that we mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
Staple segments. All right, we talked a little bit about this last night. Staple segments. And some examples of those are storytelling, trending topics, giveaways, raffles, polls, different things of that nature are examples of staple segments. What is that thing? What are those segments that make your show stand out from the rest of all the other podcasts, right? Now, for example, for the segments, we also want for you to determine how often you would feature that segment, the duration of the segment, or whether or not it has special components such as special effects, instrumentals, etc. This moment right here in creative elements is one of my favorite because you have total creative control. You can make your show whatever you want for it to be. And with these staple segments, you can go as crazy as you want, or you can kind of keep it as simple as you want.
Right.
It's totally up to you, being the host, being that producer, being that executive behind the mic, whoever or whatever role that you do play. You can do whatever you want in this space because you have complete and total creativity. Okay. Now, also regarding the how often you would feature that segment on our show, we have a number of different segments that we do feature on M&M Live Radio. One of them in particular we mentioned last night was hashtag too many hashtags, and that's when we give you guys all things current, all things trending through the use of hashtags. Now, that's a segment in which we feature every single show.
Yes.
You will not hear M&M Live Radio show without hearing hashtag too many hashtag segments at the beginning half of the show, right? Now, also with hashtag too many hashtags, we do have a special instrumental that we do play during that only segment of the show. Now, that instrumental we're not going to play at any other points or at any other times of the show because that's specific for hashtag too many hashtags. We have another segment called hot tracks off the rack, where we spend nothing but new music from the hottest artists out there. Now, with that segment, we feature once a month. Okay, we also have another segment that we do that we're actually currently doing right now is called March Motivation. Now, in the month of March, it is Women's History Month.
Mhm.
So we are having very special guests on the show all month long, but they're all female guests. And we're also playing nothing but female artists on our rundown, on our radar. We're spinning nothing but female artists. That's what we're doing in the month of March. Now, also last month being February, we also had February where we had all male guests each week all month long. So there are different segments that we do have on the show that we're playing every single show. There's some that we're doing every, you know, every once a month, of the
Once a
show.
year.
There's something we're doing once a year
Mm-hmm.
of the show. So you have to also decipher which segments you want to have something special, some sound effects, how often they're going to be played during the show. It's all totally up to you. But when you do, make sure you're consistent with that segment and how often you are playing that segment throughout the show. Okay. Also, audience interaction. Examples of that is consider posting questions on your social media, on your stories. There's so many opportunities that social media have allowed all of us to just interact with our fans, our friends, our followers. Take advantage of those and use it towards your advantage when promoting your podcast. There's also polls. A lot of our audience members really like this and that questions.
Right.
Even if it's like a would you prefer Coke or Pepsi? A lot of people you would be so surprised of how many people would actually take their time to click Pepsi on your show's podcasting platform on social media, or even having your listeners ask for your advice on a subject. Don't think for one moment that your opinion or your advice doesn't matter. They want to know what you have to think because there are some people out here going through some really, really serious things. And if they have an opportunity of writing into a show that they're really passionate about or that they enjoy listening to,
Mm-hmm.
then they're absolutely going to do that. Give your audience members that opportunity.
We actually have a segment on M&M Live Radio called Dear M&M Letter. We do this segment, I want to say once a month.
Mhm.
And then it's where one of our listeners writes to us in need of advice, whether it's things going on at work, things going on in their friendships, their relationships, just any advice. They write us a whole letter and they're able to ask us our honest opinions and we give it to them live on the air. That is an example of audience interaction, I would
Absolutely.
say.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last one I wanted to touch on here is no segments. Maybe you have a show or a platform in which you have absolutely no segments. There's no need for having trending topics. I'm not doing any giveaways. I don't really have a whole lot of audience interaction like Eminem. What would you say to someone that's dealing with or creating a show in which there are no segments? That's absolutely fine. I don't want for you to think that because your show or your platform does not have any segments that you have nothing to offer of value to the podcasting space. We had a student last semester that had no segments on her show, right? She had no segments, but her show was more so a fictional based podcast in which she was this detective downtown Atlanta that was trying to figure out the craziest crimes, and the way that she was able to make that come to life, even still regarding using her creative elements, she was able to tell her story from the perspective of being a detective on the crime scene. Right. We were able to hear, as the listeners, we were able to hear her typewriter. We were able to hear her lighting her cigarette. The lighter was going off. We heard people in the background. We heard sirens going on. We heard people
amazing.
walking down the street. It was so creative, but that was her way of just implementing her level of creativity, like sound effects, background music, something that was able to bring her podcast to life and create more of a body work when it came to her storytelling. There's so many different ways. Even there was a student last semester that was she wanted to kind of stay within the whole reading different books, and because she was more so a librarian and she was into different fictional stories and so on and so forth. So for example, I gave her the suggestion that if she was to read a story, maybe if it was like Cinderella, for example, you could hear the birds tweeting in the background. You could hear the chipmunks on the ground, or you could hear her the magic, of her fairy godmother coming into the scene. Whatever you have ideas that you could bring to your podcast, make sure you tap into whatever that is so you can make it whatever you would like. It's a blank canvas and it's totally up to you to be the artist.
Totally up to you. Okay, diving a little bit deeper into the creative elements. For those of you guys who are doing interviews and want to have interviews on your podcast, okay, this slide is for you. Okay, listen, now when it comes to interviews, this rests solely on you as the host to be able to navigate through the conversation and keep the conversation going, regardless of the energy of your guests. When I tell you, as an interviewer, if you're considering interviewing, you're going to come across so many different types of guests with so many different personalities. You're going to have your guest who is, very, very long-winded and will take probably 10 minutes to answer one simple question. And then you're going to have your other guest who's actually very, not outspoken, who will probably answer your question in 2.5 seconds. And then you're going to be pulling more out of one guest. You probably need to get less of another guest. Like it'll be honestly a big back and forth for you. But either way, regardless of who comes on your show, you're in charge of navigating how that conversation goes and flows on your show. So, with that being said, it's important that you're prepared for your guests. Now, how do you get prepared? You get prepared by writing your questions out. Listen, Meesa and I have been doing M&M Live Radio for 8 years come September. Till this day, every single question we want to ask a special guest on our show is written out. Every single one of them, from the top to the bottom, any question we want to have is written out. Only because, I think that even goes back to what we talked about yesterday about writing everything down, because we're always going to say, oh, I'm going to remember to ask them this question. Then you press record and you forget.
Yeah.
And we don't want you guys to have that issue when it comes to your show. So therefore, go ahead, but every question you have, write them out. So therefore, you don't have to jog your memory for anything when it comes to your interview. Okay. Next is expect the unexpected. Listen, in these interviews, they can go so many different ways. One question can lead into a whole other topic of conversation. It can go any way, either way. We want you guys to expect the unexpected, only because we want you guys to roll with the punches. Be ready for things to not necessarily go the way as you plan. But honestly, that can be a great thing, only because, say, if you're talking about one subject with your special guest, and then it might veer off into maybe a little rabbit trail, but yet the conversation is still engaging. It might even get, like, you might have a great dialogue going. Keep it going, because I think the main thing is that you want your listeners to be able to understand and appreciate the conversation as well. So therefore, if things don't go the way you plan when it comes to, like, your written set of questions, in some cases it's fine, as long as you're still able to hold the reins onto that interview and then bring it back in whenever, the veer off conversation dies down. And the final one I would have to say that is probably very, very important, that I know I have to do to this day, is do your research. So let me tell you guys, when we have a guest on the show, I am probably stalking that person when it comes to social media, any past interviews they've done, any tweets they recently tweeted out. I am all up in their business. Why? Because I want to use absolutely anything and everything. Anything and everything can be used as content for the interview.
Yes.
You can easily say things like, you made a tweet last week. I really want to ask you what you meant when you said that. What was the reason behind you tweeting this? Was there something you need to get out into the open? Like there's you can use anything when it comes to a picture they posted about them and their family, or them going on vacation a couple of weeks ago, or maybe you can refer to a past interview they did. I saw you did an interview with this show and you made this statement, and I wanted you to expound upon that a little bit. You can do anything you want, but doing your research will be able to give you more substance when it comes to your interview. So, in a nutshell, basically, we want you guys to be able to have full navigation and full confidence when it comes to interviewing your guests on your show. Have your questions written out, be able to expect the unexpected. Things might not go the way you plan, but that is okay. And then also, at the end of the day, do your research. Therefore, your interview can be able to have substance and a great conversation at the end of the day.
And I do also want to chime in on that also. When finding guests for your show, please make sure you are doing, and Meah also mentioned, doing your research of if that guest on your show contributes to the overall, overarching reason as to why you are a podcast.
Yes, that's a great, great, great note. I was thinking that too, because you don't say, if you have a podcast that's geared towards single moms who are at home, you know what I'm saying? You will not have a guest on there who's talking about credit repair, because what does that have to do with you being able to manage your kids at home and you being a mom? You know what I'm saying? So you might have maybe a child psychologist come on. You know what I'm saying? Like, you might have different things, someone who's very experienced when it comes to, troubled kids, when it comes to them going from their going in their toddler years, when it comes to navigating that crazy toddler phase. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can be so many different things that you can be able to do, but make sure your guests make sense. You want you be able to have a guest that be able to fits in perfectly with the overall aura of your show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, here we go. Now, this is the fundamentals of hosting. Now, this does go specifically to a lot of our, students out there that are going to have a co-host on their show, because I do think that this is very important, and a lot of people tend to overlook this as if, oh, it's great, I'm going to have a co-host on my show, we can go back and forth in conversation. Yes, you absolutely can go back and forth, and it's even better to have a co-host on your show so that you're not just feeling like you're talking to yourself,
right?
Because I mean, sometimes you can feel like you're talking just to yourself on, when you're just in a studio by yourself, or in a studio with your engineer, but your engineer is not necessarily on the show with you. So, with the fundamentals of hosting, the first thing we want to get into is always having a rundown and know what's on it. Always have a rundown and know what is on that rundown. Okay. Now, I know last night or last class, we do remember showing you guys a rundown that Mia and I always use every single show. And if you do remember that rundown, I want for you to kind of think about the fact that in the beginning half, when we had that intro, there was a paragraph's worth of things that we usually kind of, talk about, intro the show, tell everyone what to expect while they're listening to the 60-minute show. And some things were highlighted yellow and some were not highlighted at all. The things that were highlighted in yellow were Mia's things that she
Mm-hmm.
wanted to say. Okay. And the things that were not highlighted were more so my cues that I had to make sure that I hit at the beginning of the show. Now, doing that, it makes us so much more organized, because one thing that you do not want to do or fall into when having a co-host on your show is to talk over each other. Okay, we have two separate people, two separate personalities, two separate levels of confidence, right, that we talked
Mm-hmm.
about. And it's nothing like trying to get into a conversation in which the both of you are just like talking over each other over and over and over again. It causes the listener to kind of get a little lost into what's really going on right now, especially like in the heat of a great conversation and somebody said something super funny, everyone's falling all over the place, but we can't hear the funny part. We want to be able to laugh with you
Mm-hmm.
and not just kind of sit there and try to figure out who said what and what the funny joke is. It's kind of like leaving them out of the joke or having somewhat of an insider and not including your listeners in on that. Okay, so at least find a way in which you can listen to your co-host when they're speaking and they speak, and then vice versa. When you speak, they're able to listen and you're able to, still remain separate personalities, but still contributing to the same show,
Mm-hmm.
right? All right, next we have master the arts of teasing. This is definitely a tip that production, even in television, use to this
To
day.
this day.
Okay, so mastering the art of teasing. The art of teasing is more so when you're able to kind of tease a little bit to your listeners or to your followers what they can expect to hear maybe in the next few minutes or maybe the next show or later on in the season of your show, what they can expect from your podcast or from your platform. So like for example, if there's like a therapist, usually therapists are really chill, they're very mellow, they're able to, figure out what people are dealing with and get into their minds. And they're like, welcome back to Meesa's podcast where we talk nothing about therapy. Make sure you stay tuned because I have to let you know about a moment in which I was standing in the grocery line and I had to cuss this man out at the store. It was absolutely ridiculous. And then I prayed for him afterwards. Stay tuned right here on Misa's podcast about therapy. What? Like how are you not able to compose yourself in the milk aisle of a grocery store because you cuss somebody out, and why you cuss them out? Some type of reason, some type of art of teasing, you can contribute that to what you're dealing with. Or for example, even with us on the show, we tease conversations coming up. Make sure you stay tuned a little bit later on. We have our male's perspective, Kimo Jones, stopping by, and we're talking everything about love and marriage and why he had to go off on his wife because she didn't make him a sandwich. We have to stay tuned to figure out what his wife said after he said what he said about that sandwich. Stay tuned right here on none other than you already know. It's Eminem Live Radio. Different things of that nature. You can use the art of teasing to bring and reel in your listeners just a little bit more. Okay. Also, be mindful of conversational habits, especially with your co-host. Like I mentioned a little earlier, there's moments in which there's going to be high energy conversations or moments in which something is super funny, or maybe there's an opportunity in which a question has came through, or somebody had commented and you want to get into that comment, and your co-host may be one that wants to chime in before they forget their thoughts, and they tend to like talk over you, certain things of that nature. You have to be able to decipher who does what. If your listener is definitely the one that cannot hold on to that thought because so much is going on during the show, maybe they should be the one that actually reads the comments so that they can answer first. Or maybe you need to be the one that every time you guys do laugh on the microphone, you're not laughing right here because it's too loud. You're more so leaning back a bit so that
Mm-hmm.
it's not so loud and harsh on the ears of your listeners.
That's good. It's very, very good. Okay, branding and marketing. We're still diving deep into the basics of podcasting. So, we're going to go ahead and talk about branding and marketing, but not just talk about them, but even compare the two because they are two totally different topics. Okay. So, branding is who you are, while marketing is building awareness about who you are. So, let's go ahead and dive into what branding is. So, branding is how do you want your listeners to describe your show after listening? So, meaning afterwards, do your listeners walk away inspired and really encouraged? Do they walk away always laughing and then always having a great time and feeling so entertained? Do they always feel suspense and they always feel the drama of the show, the fictional podcast you have? How do your listeners describe your show after listening to it? That is the brand of what your show is. It's full of suspense. It's inspirational. It's always entertaining. It's informative. Like let people know, think about how you would want your listeners to walk away listening to your show. Also, what can they say about the host after encountering them on the airwaves? And this is important because you're never going to meet all of your listeners
Yeah.
on your podcast. That's just the natural, especially now with COVID now. It's going to be hard nowadays, but you want for your listeners always walking away. What do they always say? I know Meesa and I, we're two hosts on one podcast,
Yeah.
but people will walk away having one depiction of who Meesa is and then one of who I am because we are two totally different people. So how will people walk away thinking about you after encountering you on the air? Will they say that you're very professional? Will they say that you're very, always entertaining? You always give great advice and great insight. Are you someone who's always motivational and always motivating their listeners to always do great and amazing things? Are they someone who's very stern and serious and gets right to the point and gets right to the facts? How will they describe you? That is a part of who your brand is because they will say, oh, that person is very serious. They are always very happy. They're always very positive. What can they say about you after encountering you on the airwaves? And the final thing they can say you want for your listeners to be able to know is what they can say that you stand for. Me said that I think people would say that we stand for great music and positive entertainment. That's what we stand for. Even also we're also Christians and we're also a Christian-based podcast. So we're also believers as well. How can people say what you stand for on your podcast? Are you someone who's very for women, who's into, feminism, and it's about, women standing up for themselves and, being strong women in today's world? Will they say that you're someone who's very outspoken on political issues in today's times, with Black Lives Matter and things like that? Well, they say that you're someone who stands for being happy and valuing their mental health. What do you stand for? That is a big thing when it comes to branding, when it comes to your listeners walking away knowing who you are, what your show is about, and also what you stand for.
Okay. All right. So also, and Meah, actually, let's go back a little bit because
Okay.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about branding and marketing and so on and so forth. So when it comes to branding and marketing, ladies, I want to make sure that I talk to you about how you can get all of that information out there.
Mhm.
Because I mean, branding and marketing is a very important part of once your podcast launch or even right before your podcast does launch.
Mhm.
We want for the word to get out there. We want for you to start gaining some, engagement with your listeners, with your audience, and how you can get those listeners to actually tune in to your podcast. So the more you do it, the better. The more you brand, the more you post, the more you market yourself, the absolute better it's going to be. All
Mhm.
right, so you have to understand that branding is repetition. That's consistency. That's you always showing up. That's you always posting different things of that nature, but make sure you're doing it the absolute right way. So like, for example, and I'm not quite sure of where everyone is tuned in from or where you guys are from as of right now, but for example, I want to kind of give you a little tidbit of what a lot of people, especially in production, just period, whether it's radio, whether it's television, whether it's film, they use these tactics of branding and marketing. And that's definitely the repetition and consistency that I had just
Yes.
mentioned, right? So, for example, if you live in Georgia, if you live in the city of Atlanta,
Mhm.
I want to make sure that I mention to you the importance of branding because it is used absolutely all the time. Okay. Now, how many of you can honestly say that you remember if you get into an accident or your car or truck gets hit, you can call who? 1-800-411-PAIN. It's on everywhere. Okay, that's the reason why every time we drive through the city,
Very popular here in Atlanta.
every single time we drive through the city and we turn on the radio, we get so mad because this is a new song that we think is a brand new song, and it's not a brand new song. It's a new tagline. It's a new song that some attorney has made. But it's great because the way that they're doing it is they're trying to get that catchy phrase 1-800-411-pain.
After 911, call 411.
After every single accident. So I know for a fact that how annoying it can be to turn on the radio, to listen to another 411 pain song, or to drive down the street and see 411 pain on a bus, or to keep on driving down the interstate and you see call after 911, call 411 on a billboard. They're doing their branding. They're making sure that if you get into an accident, you know exactly who to call. So honestly, if I do get into a fender bender, God forbid, I'm not gonna lie to you. There's moments where I might say, I might call, 411 pain for a second. But they're doing a great job. They're tapping into the jingles, they're tapping into the visuals, they're on the side of benches. They have, different, forms of media and print art all over the city. They know for a fact that they're doing everything that they can to get as many listeners to understand and to marry their brand or their business as much as possible. Okay. The same thing goes for Macy's and JC Penney's and other, different big businesses such as those entities. For example, especially around Thanksgiving, especially
Black
around
Fridays,
Christmas,
the Cyber Monday sales,
the blockbusters, the doorbusters, everything must go. This is 20-something% off. The after Thanksgiving sale. They're trying to make sure that you all understand that they have something that they want for you to get engaged with, and it's their product. And the best way that they can do it is that they're going to make sure that they are seen everywhere. There's been so many moments, even during the election, y'all. I'm so happy the election is over with because everyone that was involved directly with the election, they were sending me text messages. They were calling me. I heard, so many different campaigns on the commercials. After every single show, I would hear another commercial on the radio. I would see different ways in which they're promoting their campaigns and different things of that nature. It was a lot that was going on, but for a fact that this past presidential election, or even just election in general, you knew the people who were running. You knew where to cast your vote. You knew different things about each person that were running for office. You knew because they did their job in marketing and branding. You're going to have to understand that when it comes to getting your word out there about your podcast, about your show, about what you have going on, even the launch of your show, you have to keep consistently posting. You have to keep reintroducing yourself, because you can't assume that just because you said it the very first time that everyone's going to catch on to that. That's why every single time you do hear the show or M&M Live Radio, we are always reintroducing our names. We're also telling you who we are or how to always follow us on social media. Our faithful followers may always get so, just frustrated with us because we're always saying, follow us at MM Live Radio on Twitter and on Instagram. And make sure you follow us on Facebook also at M&M Live Radio. The faithful followers may be a little tired about it. We may even get a little frustrated with saying it, a few times throughout the show, but you can't assume that you're not going to get a new follower, or that you're going to have a new listener. There's someone new that's always going to come across your show, and they may say, what was their social media again? Even though you said it about 5 different times, you have to be getting into that habit, because you may have the opportunity of getting a brand new listener or a brand new follower of your show and of your podcast.
Yes.
All right, so let's plan your podcast premiere rollouts, okay? And basically, if you're not quite sure of what a rollout is, that's more so your plan of how you're going to promote your show. Okay, that's what a lot of artists do, throughout
in the music
industry. And I feel like we as podcasters, us as creatives, we need a rollout also. Okay, so we need a schedule, we need a calendar, we need a plan. Let's start thinking about these different things. Okay, so let's plan a date and let's follow through. These are definitely for those that have not launched their podcast yet. If you're not quite sure of where your podcast is going or what you even want to do for your podcast, let's start thinking about those different things. Don't be afraid to refer back to those 3 C's that we talked about, but make sure we set a date and we follow through on that date. That goes back to the time management that we mentioned a little earlier also. Okay, we got to make sure that we stick to that plan, because sometimes it can be very, very easy to, not set a date and say, well, I'm thinking about a date in March. March comes and goes. Now we're in April. Okay, well, I'm thinking about like maybe April 20th, like maybe April 20th. You have not written anything down. You haven't planned anything. April 20th rolls through and now we're in December. You want to make sure that you have a date and you follow through on that launch of your podcast. Okay. Pre-premiere to-do list. Make sure you create your logo and or your podcast artwork. Okay. This is a way in which you can tangibly get to your listeners through social media. Okay. We need to be able to see what your podcast looks like. If you could put some colors on your podcast, what does it look like? You don't necessarily at this moment need to have a graphic artist or a graphics designer on your team right now. You can do a lot of things for free, and you can do a lot of things for yourself. And the best way to create your own logo for your podcast or artwork is to go to canva.com. Make sure you write that down, canva.com. It's a great resource that Meah and I have even used. It's very, very easy. It saves right there for you. You can do some of everything. I do think that it's easier to use Canva on a laptop.
Yes, but you can also use it on an app. It has an app as well.
Okay, absolutely. So canva.com, I would definitely recommend to go ahead and start playing around with different images. Figure out what you want, even before you even get a graphic artist. Figure out what colors you like. Get creative. Play around with these different things so that people on social media can identify what your podcast artwork or visuals look like. Also, create a social media handle. Now, this, I think it kind of should be a no-brainer, because I do think that if you already are on social media, Twitter, and you have an Instagram or you have a Facebook, you might as well use those same friends that you're following to get them to follow the podcasting page, right? So if you have a social media and you have Instagram, make sure you're posting consistently. Make sure it's easy. Your Instagram handle is easy to understand. I would also recommend that it's consistent throughout all the other social media apps. So if it's, Tierra underscore listen with me, for example. I know your show is probably not going to be called Listen with Me, but for example, if it's Tierra underscore listen with me, or just Tierra listen with me, make that the same thing that your listeners can follow you on Facebook and on Twitter. Not Tierra listen with me, then on Twitter is Tierra underscore listen with me, and then on Facebook is listen with me with Tierra. It's a little too much to follow if you have so many different ways of describing or finding your Instagram handle. Okay. Also, don't be afraid to tap into TikTok. I'm not going to lie to you. That's something that Meah and I and the team are trying to, start logging on into is the whole TikTok world and the Reels. We're trying to get involved in that too. But I heard that TikTok and Reels, well, more so TikTok, I'll start with that. TikTok has absolutely no algorithm. So everyone has a fair chance of getting in front of a great audience. You don't have to have that blue verified check or anything. You don't have to have a certain amount of followers. You literally can post something and literally go viral that next day, depending on whatever you post, So don't be afraid of TikTok and Reels. All right. Next, we have to establish a website or a landing page. Don't let this deter you or kind of like make you stand back a little bit from mentioning the word website or even landing page, because I know that also does require web designers, and sometimes you can come out of pocket with these different things. But there are also free ways in which you are able to at least create somewhat of a website yourself and somewhat of a landing page for yourself. And a landing page is like a one-pager website-like space in which you can tell a little bit more about yourself, your podcast, what to expect, different things of that nature, how people can be in contact with you, even listing a few pictures of you in action. Different ways. Those are landing pages, okay? But you can go to about.me or you can go to Wix.com. Both free 99 websites in which you can do things yourself. You can test things out yourself, but at least you can drive your traffic of your podcast listenership back to some place if they would like to get in contact with you. Okay. And then lastly, right here, we have determine what content you will post that tell the listeners more about the show while building your brand off air. Okay. Determine what content you will post that tells the listeners more about the show while building your brand off air. So, example, if you have a show that's more so about cooking and becoming a chef or being a chef, you 9 times out of 10 should start posting a lot more about your life in the kitchen, or your favorite desserts, or maybe your favorite cutlery, or different things of that nature. Try to stay committed to what your show is about. Or allowing your listeners to chime in on what their favorite breakfast foods are, or different things of that nature, or maybe sharing your mom's favorite secret recipe on sweet potato pie, different things of that nature. You want to make sure you commit to the overall look and face and feel and vibe of your podcast. You won't necessarily post anything about your car if you are a chef. You know what I'm saying? It would not make sense, but try to figure out what your niche is. Figure out what that looks like. At this point, we're putting a face on your podcast and allowing your listeners to identify of what your podcast is actually about, because they're listening audibly. You want to figure out what that is, that you can kind of like engage with them visually.
That's good. Okay, we're going to talk about your pre-premiere and your post-premiere marketing ideas. Okay, so pre-premiere ideas will be introduce the show, introduce yourself as host. This is on, you can do this on many different forms on social media, whether it's your LinkedIn page, whether you have an email blast or things like that. Be able to introduce who you are, but then even also what your show will entail to get people excited about what this show that's coming before it even launches. Okay, now repost quotes that you agree with. This even goes back to, I think, even branding. Say if you're someone who has a podcast where you're very inspirational, maybe you're even maybe very spiritual as well. You might want to post your favorite scripture or your favorite inspirational quote that can get people, like, their day started. Happy Monday motivation. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of things like that can be really helpful and help get people excited. Basically, what we want you to do is to be able to still have a presence on social media and have a presence on the internet before your show even comes about. So you want people to be able to be excited, be able to gain their attention, not even if it's talking about the show, but even things that are just centered around the show as well. So say you're someone who's a food fanatic here in Atlanta. You might want to post your favorite food spots that are here in the city. You don't have to post necessarily about your show, but do things that will make sense, that are centered around the topic and the niche of your show. Okay, it can also be articles. Maybe say I heard some people who also have podcasts who are very driven on, like, maybe it's crime scene investigating, or like, when it comes to history here in being Black in America, Black history, things like that. You can post your favorite articles and things like that. People who have made impact here, who have written stories about, like, your favorite pioneers when it comes to Black history and other things. You can post that and be able to upload that to your website, upload that to your landing page, so on and so forth. It can be tips, if you're someone who's very big on mental health, you want to be able to, say there's someone who has a podcast for single moms when it comes to their mental health. You can post different tips on how to be able to self-care for yourself and be able to, make yourself first and be able to wind down on your Wednesdays and whatnot. Those little tips and tricks can be able to be very helpful to your audience and will give you a presence as well. We want you guys to even post videos about your podcast. Listen, this is so, so key. Even though you do have a podcast that is solely audio driven, it will be great for you to even have videos for your podcast as well, only because we live in a world who is very visual. And when it comes to you be able to gain their attention in an audio sense, in an audio realm, we even want to be able to gain those listeners and gain those followers in a visual sense as well. So whether it's, you posting a video of yourself and, being in studio, recording a certain segment or things like that, or you be in studio telling people how to get excited about your podcast because it's dropping on this date at this time every single Wednesday, anything like that, anything you can think of that can be able to gain the interest of people visually. We want that. one thing that Meesa and I that we did when it came to our podcast, what was that? I guess 2013 was we did a countdown. This is a very simple trick or a very simple marketing idea you can use to be able to gain your listeners. It's simply just saying, hey, we have 7 days left for the podcast for Courtney's podcast to release. We're so excited. Be sure to be able to follow us on all social media. Just counting people down, getting them excited about what's to come and what your podcast has to say on the day that it's going to be released. You want to be able to get people excited about this when it comes to premiering your podcast. And even encourage your listeners to subscribe to whatever platform they can listen to your show, whether it's
Yes.
on iTunes. Listen, everybody listens to different platforms on different things. As much as I am in Android, I'm an iPhone user. Some people, they love their Android. I know somebody who was like, they're not doing anything iPhone. They're team Spotify all the way. There are people who like listening on iHeartRadio and different things like that. Make sure you'll be able to broadcast and tell people, okay, make sure you guys are subscribed on iTunes, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever you can find your podcast. Be sure to pump that platform that it's on so people can subscribe to it, because when they subscribe, they get notified every single time your show is uploaded. So being able to tell your listeners and your followers where to subscribe to the podcast before your podcast is even up is very, very, very key. And then even also be able to post and let people know when your premiere date is, the day of your premiere date. If you have a specific time, that's great as well. But even also just the date in general, so people can get excited and look forward to when that date drops. Okay. Now, all of those that I just mentioned that I just talked about are pre-premiere marketing ideas. Now, so what is your post-premiere marketing idea? This is after the show is released, after the show is out there. The first episode is on all podcasting platforms, whatever podcasting platform is on. So what is your post premiere marketing idea? Listen, you're going to do everything that you did in pre-premiere, and all the only thing you're going to add to that whole marketing strategy is now you're going to start adding and posting the content of your show. What does that look like? Snippets of your show, whether it's a 60-second where you maybe have said something that was very, very intricate and very worth of substance that you want for people to be able to tap into when it comes to that show. It can be an interview, a story you told, an advice you gave for a listener, anything that it can be able to upload that to your social media, so therefore you can market what entails in your show for that week. I remember when we did Eminem Live Radio, after we did our very first show, we did our pre-premiere. Our marketing was
It
A1.
was
we
great.
we did the inspirational quotes, we introduced ourselves as hosts, we posted the logo, we did all those, we did a countdown, the whole nine. And then after we uploaded the show, for the whole week, we posted nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then it was crazy, but we didn't know it was a problem until one of our mentors said, "What are you? Why have you guys post all this week? What's going on with Eminem Live Radio? What did you guys do this week? What can I expect with your next show?" He's the main reason to why we stand so firm when we say that the pre-premiere in is basically going to be brought into your post-premiere. You have to keep all that going. Just because you did all the marketing and getting people excited, you want that every single week when it comes to your podcast. You want people to be excited about the special guest that's going to be on your show, or the upcoming conversation, or what you said this week. You want to be able to gain people's attention, not just before the show launches, but every day, every week, every month, every single show
Yeah,
after.
absolutely. That was really good. All right, here we go. Branding and marketing strategies continue. Now, it's very important to create a marketing strategy when it comes to your podcast. Like I mentioned, consistency and repetition is key. All right. Always lead your social media posts back to your podcast. I very much invest, and I do encourage everyone to use hashtags.
Yes.
Hashtags are a great way for people to find you. So if you happen to have a consistent hashtag, like for example, we have hashtag MM Live Radio. We use that hashtag under every single post. If you happen to, come across us on your search page or on your explore page, and you can't necessarily remember what our name is, which is MM Live Radio, you can type in hashtag MM Live Radio and you'll find all of our posts, every last one of our posts. But I feel like that's a great way to keep things consistent.
Mhm.
That's a great way to find somebody very, very easily, because we can't use the and sign. So it would be M and M Live Radio, but it would be too long. I'm not spelling out the word and. I'm just not doing it. You know what I'm
No.
saying? So MM Live Radio is where you can find us on all social media sites. And because it's that consistent, people are easier, or it's much easier for people to find us. Like even just recently here in Atlanta, we do have the NBA All-Star game that's down here. Don't ask me if I'm going because I'm not
Mm-mm.
doing anything this weekend. But
Mm-mm.
anyway, there's been a lot of people who have reached out to us that have come into town, people that we've never even met before, that have found us on social media and know that we're in Atlanta, and they would reach out to us in our DMs. We have so many DMs from people just out of state and wanting to connect with us. And I was thinking to myself, how are they able to find us? But it was because of the use of social media and the fact that we're able to be consistent and be repetitive as far as all of our posting. Sometimes in our series of hashtags that we do put underneath our posts, we would put, hashtag ATL podcasters, or, ATL media personalities and different things of that nature. So I'm not quite sure of what they typed in to find us, but there's still a lot of people that are wanting to reach out to us to, hey, I would love to be, on the show because we have this coming out, we have that coming out, different things of that nature. But it is a great way to be found on social media. All right. Now, also, the more you post, the better. And consider boosting your post to gain exposure. Now, the more you post is absolutely amazing. There are different social media sites that we do follow, like the Shade Room. I'm not sure if you all have heard about the Shade Room, but they post and they have over millions and millions of followers because they post about 13 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So when it comes to, different things, I can always expect something new, and everyone loves something new. Everyone wants the new trending thing. Everyone wants to figure out what's the biggest next trending topic that's out. And because Shade Room is always posting consistently almost every single hour or every other hour at least, they are on top of that newness and something that's trending and something that's, current, different things of that nature. So everyone tends to go to the Shade Room to figure out what they can figure out that's new. Okay. And also consider boosting your post to gain exposure. When you boost your post, basically that's when you put a little money behind your post. You're able to, invest a little bit in your marketing strategy, if you will. So even just recently with the Podcasting Academy, we did boost our post so that our post, that one post that says so much information about the Podcasting Academy, was able to get in front of maybe about 300,000 people. And we had different regions in which we wanted for our post to be seen. We had different areas in which we wanted for it to be broadcasted. We made sure that our post was seen on people's stories. There were different things and different ways for our social media posts could be out there in front of a grander audience, because we decided to put a little money behind it. You could put $5, you could put $10, you could put $50. Some go as far as putting $1,000, and they actually have allocated money in their budget to market and to brand so that they have more of a range of their posts getting in front of a grand scheme of an audience.
Or it can go as little as $10 for a post.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just consider that if you do want to make your launch a really big thing, do consider, maybe saving a little bit of money and putting that money behind your post that you can get in front of a larger audience on social media. Also, create a personalized hashtag. This is how other people can stumble across your podcast without ever hearing it while using social media. I mentioned that already. So figure out what that special hashtag is for you for your show and be consistent with that. But also don't be afraid to use other ones, like, wherever you guys may live. Maybe you're a Houston podcaster, you're a Houston creative. Use hashtag Houston creative. Use hashtag podcast. Use honestly, the more or the less people that happen to use that hashtag, the better, because the more specific that you do get, the more you'll get in front of those audiences that happen to use or search that hashtag.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, so now we're going to dive into networking when it comes to learning the basics here of having a podcast. Okay, so when it comes to networking, basically, networking would have been so much easier, honestly, if COVID was not happening. But therefore, we got to get really creative with how we network and how we meet other podcasters, other, influential people in the industry or whatever niche we're in. So therefore, we have to basically seize social media, seize the internet to the best of our advantage. So here's how we can do that. Follow other similar pages to yours and engage under their posts. I know that there are a lot of people who might do I know some people who do parenting podcasts where, there's a mom and a dad and they're able to talk about the lives of parenting as maybe young millennials or being, Black in America, Hispanic in America, so many different things. I follow so many people who are like that. And I think if you're someone who was like that, maybe you might want to follow other influencers who have those things. Maybe it's other brand pages or other podcasts in the best way possible. I think that's great because you will probably feel like you're the only person who has a podcast like yours. I know we felt like that when we first had M&M Live Radio until we dove deep into going on social media, going on YouTube, going on podcasts to see who are some other people who do relatively the same thing, talk about the relatively same topics or the same music, the same artists that we play on our show. And therefore, we found so many people who are able to engage with. And I think engagement is so key because one, you can be able to see that you're see how they maybe even engage with their followers and their listeners as well, but even also you can be able to engage with them as well. Maybe you can even go further as you even sending a DM and being like, hi, I have a podcast, I would love for us to be able to support one another. That's a great thing to do, be able to build relationships with other people in the industry that you're in. So engaging under people's posts, social media, their LinkedIn, their YouTube, their podcast in itself, leaving a review and things like that can really help you network in when it comes to your podcast. Okay. Also, be familiar with the industry that you're in. So for me, so the industry we're in is, I would say, I guess we call it Christian hip hop, CHH also, but we would also say, the podcasting realm, but even though inspiration and positivity as well, inspiration and positivity in entertainment. So that would be the industry that we're in, even when it comes to even podcasters with us doing the podcasting academy and things like that. Some people, I know for one of our listeners, I know we had last semester, we had someone who did Mothering with Intention was what's the name of their podcast. So their, industry was mothering, lifestyle as a mom with millennials, or lifestyle as a mom and seeing their kids grow up. That will be your niche. That is the industry you're in lifestyle and, mothering and things like that. If your industry is beauty, when it comes to like, makeup or, skincare and things like that, that is your industry that you're in. Be able to be familiar and be able to tack into what that is. Even if you're just like, talking about life and things going on in today's world, that is called culture. That is called current news, trending topics. That is the culture you are in.
Yeah.
So therefore, be able to be familiar and can be able to, nitpick and be able to pinpoint what your niche is when it comes to your podcast. Okay. And even also, we want you guys to be bold about your podcast. Be bold about what your show embodies, what you talk about every single week, whether it's, something that's personal, whether you're telling stories about your childhood and how it affected you, and whether you're talking about your mental health space, or whether it's, things going on in today's world where you're talking all about things that are going on in Hollywood with Kim and Kanye being divorced and, this celebrity and this celebrity doing that. Be bold about what your podcast is about, because your podcast is original. Like we said this yesterday, your podcast is original, regardless of however many podcasts are similar or might have the same, ideas or topics. Yours is very unique. So be bold about that. And then even also, if you give support, you will get support. I'm actually I've been doing that a lot, especially since COVID, reaching out to other podcasters, other interviewers in the industry that Meesa and I are in, and just reaching out, telling them, hi, I have a podcast. I love your podcast as well. We'll be able to support your podcast in the best way it possibly can. And then every single time someone's like, okay, great, give me your link to your podcast, I want to be able to support too. That's how you build relationships in your industry. And coronavirus can't keep you from doing that. You know what I'm saying? Because, we can't go to it. Because, it would be easier if coronavirus wasn't here and we had events we could go to like that before. That's what we used to do.
Yeah.
We would go to concerts, we would go to conferences, we would go to red carpet events, and that was the way we were able to network. But therefore, because we can't do that right now, social media, LinkedIn, Clubhouse, I would definitely recommend Clubhouse as well. I'm so glad that I brought that up. Clubhouse is a great networking platform and best way to build relationships in your industry. Everyone is very, very great there. If you don't know about Clubhouse, it's basically an app that actually isn't out yet to the public. You have to get an invite or know someone in Clubhouse and be able to get invited into it. But it's basically seminars and workshops, and the best way for you to be able to network possible and gain knowledge and build relationships in whatever industry you're in. And before you even sign up for the app, it'll ask you, it'll give you like a list of different topics and, industries for what might pique your interest. And you can click anything and they'll be able to pull you right into what that industry, what that niche is, what that topic is that you're interested in hearing more about. So if anyone ever needs, if you're interested in getting into Clubhouse, we have a Clubhouse and we can be able to send you an invite. I'll recommend it to anybody. But therefore, I say all that to say is that we got to use social media to the best way of our ability, because of the things in today's times that we're living in. So give support, get support. That's the best way to be able to do that when it comes to networking. Be bold about your podcast, whatever you talk about. about whatever topics you entail on your show. Be familiar with the industry you're in, be aware of the topics and you know who else is in your space doing the same thing or relatively the same thing that you're doing, and also follow other pages and engage under their posts, therefore they can see that there are other shows like yourself, and therefore you can be able to build relationships via the internet.
Yeah, very, very good. Very good. All right. I believe we have reached the end of another great class of the Podcasting Academy. Please feel free to unmute yourself. Please feel free to utilize that chat and ask any type of questions that you guys may have, running through your minds right now. We really try to concise, all the information that we do have into an hour. We don't want to take up your entire Saturday or your entire Friday. We know that people got stuff they got to do, people that they got to see, so on and so forth. So we really try to, keep it in within an hour's time.
Mm-hmm.
But feel free to go ahead and like ask your questions, chime on in, and utilize that chat box. We wanted to know what your thoughts are. Even if you want for us to expand on a few other things, we would love to. Absolutely. Let me see what we have here. Okay, so Tiara says, "What is an effective time frame to plan a
Great
launch?"
question. Great question. I would say for that, I would say a month's time. The one thing you do not want to do is rush your launch date, because you want to be able to people to build anticipation, and you want to be able to, because you have to seize from, I want to say, from the time you start promoting to the time you actually launch. You need to, because I think even with also when it comes to promoting your podcast and things like that with the algorithms on
Mhm.
Instagram, that fact that everybody isn't necessarily guaranteed to see your post. So let's say if you give yourself 2 weeks time, so you probably won't be able to get the opportunity to have as many people as possible to hear about your podcast as being able to launch. So personally, to me, I would say a month's time would be great to be able to say how you're going to start your pre-premiere rollout for your podcast. I would say max, maybe if you want to do a month and a half, but the only reason why I say don't do so much time is because you don't want to keep it drawn out where you
Mhm.
lose people's attention. So
Yeah.
I would say definitely a month's time, maybe even 3 weeks, but I think a month's time is ideal. What do you think?
Absolutely. Because I mean, you don't want to forget that, at this point, we're talking about, you're promoting and different things of that nature. You cannot forget that we still have to plan the actual show.
Yes.
And not to mention shows after that show comes out. So you want to make sure that you give yourself ample time. Of course, there's the busies of life. Some of us may have kids, some of us may have, big things planned coming up. Maybe a trip is coming up and you want to make sure that you're able to relax for your trip, different things of that nature. You want to be able to make sure you have time allocated for you to plan out your podcast.
But I will say this. So when it comes to you promoting your podcast and within that month's time, you might do like, a couple of days. You might, every maybe 3 days, you might do a post, or every 2 days. But when you get into that week of your podcast launching, you need to post every single day, because now you're getting 7 days away from your podcast being launched. And that's the time when you have to go. Make sure you go hard. You're in everybody's face. Anytime someone's on social media, they need to see a promotion or a flyer or something where you're letting people know, hey, we're 6 days away, we're 5 days away, we're only 3 days away. Tomorrow is the big day. You want to be able to get everyone's attention for that. So within that month's time, I can see you maybe doing every other day leading up to it. But when you get to that week away, you gotta really have to go hard and hone in on that promoting.
You have to. And not only that, but another good tip that Mia and I have found to be super helpful is the fact that you can rely on your friends. Please do not be afraid to rely on your friends, because, if you simply ask them, hey, I have a really big launch date coming up. Can you repost this flyer? Can you repost this on your story? Can you repost this right here? Or can you do this over here? Or do you mind going on live with me really
Mm-hmm.
quick to talk about how excited you are for my podcast to go live on this day? Or maybe we have a launch party and you go live yourself, and you have like, some people kind of coming in talking about how excited they are or what they want to look forward to regarding your podcast. Make sure you utilize your friends and do not be afraid to ask them, because honestly, support is free. To repost on somebody else's page is free.
Yes.
Sometimes they don't know how to help unless you ask them.
Yes.
So don't be afraid to ask for help and get some exposure from using your friends or even some followers on your social media that you happen to follow. Let me see here. Can you pre-record the content prior to actually going live?
Yes. So further on in the Podcasting Academy, actually next class, we're actually not going to be teaching this class, but our engineer Kimo Jones, who engineers every single show that we do, he's going to be giving you guys all of the information you could possibly need when it comes to equipment and how to record your show. I highly recommend that everybody is in class next Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when it comes to that, because that is a big part of when it comes to launching your podcast. He's going to talk about software and even how you can easily record your podcast from your phone.
Yes.
And it's honest, when he gives the information that he's going to give, you're going to feel so much at ease, because sometimes when it comes to recording a podcast, you get very intimidated because you think it's a whole bunch of things that you don't know and software you have to buy and you don't know what to do. When I tell you, he has tips and tools and resources that are easy as you doing it on your smart device.
Absolutely.
So therefore, please, I would encourage, yes, Courtney, it can be very overwhelming, but listen, I encourage you to please be here next Friday at 7 p.m. because Kimo will definitely be able to give you guys as much knowledge as you can and be able to lessen that stress when it comes to recording your podcast. So, but yes, to answer your question, Tiara, you can pre-record your content and Kimo will go further and deep into that next Friday.
And do not be afraid to ask Kimo absolutely anything, because one thing I can say is that when he does the show for us, he makes it look super easy.
So easy.
He makes it look super easy. He's a very crazy personality kind of guy. You know, you guys are going to have a lot of fun with him. He's going to have a lot of fun with you guys. But next class is called PE class, and it stands for podcasting equipment. So please make sure that you're here, because he's also going to give you guys some tips and tricks on what podcasting equipment that you can purchase that's not going to break your bank.
Yes.
And some that are going to be, a little bit more on the higher end when it comes to, spending your dollars, but you do not have to break your bank to have a good quality sounding podcast. Okay. So that's next class. Make sure you are doing your podcasting plan. That is your homework. You have until, what is it, Thursday?
Yes.
Thursday of this upcoming week to make sure you get that completed. Be as creative as possible. If you're not even quite sure, hey, don't be afraid to put I'm not sure at the moment, or even if you kind of want to just test some things out
just
there.
Give us any ideas that run through your mind right now, because we want to be able to at least have an idea for what you have envisioned
and figure out the best way that we can accommodate you all in figuring out how we can launch your podcast successfully and get things off the air, especially by everyone in here being aspiring podcasters. Okay. So are there any other questions that you guys may have? Feel free to drop them in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Even also, I have a quick question. If there's any of you guys who need yesterday's class or this current class on recording to be able to go back to, please send us an email and let us know if that's the content you will want. I will be able to send you the link to these courses that we're doing right now for yesterday's course and this current course right now afterwards. So if you want to be able to go back and listen back to them, please let us know. Okay, Courtney, I will make sure. Please let me know. Send us an email and let us know which courses, if you want yesterday's course, today's course, or both. Please let us know. I'll be able to send those out to you guys. But listen, if you don't have any more questions, that is all for class today. We really appreciate you guys all being here. Okay, both Tiara. Okay, I'll be sure to send you guys both of the courses. I'll do course 1 and course 2. But that is all for class today. Thank you guys so much for being here for course 2 of the Podcasting Academy. We're so excited that you guys are be able to take your podcast to the next level and be able to get started, and that you're trusting Meesa and I to help breed and develop you guys as we go along throughout this course. Like I said, be sure you're here next Friday at 7 p.m. You're going to learn about PE, your podcasting equipment, software, and how you can easily record your podcast. But if there are no further questions, we want you guys to have an amazing weekend, and we'll see you guys next week.
Absolutely. Don't forget your homework. The podcasting plan is due next Thursday, and make sure you use those confidence building tips that we also talked about also. Okay. So make sure you record yourself, give it to somebody that you guys trust, give them or allow them to give you their honest to God opinion. Don't be afraid to read for 10 minutes some form of literature out loud every single day and figure out what those safety words are. Okay. But in the meantime, in between time, we'll see you guys. Have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you on Friday.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.